So while this does happen to be the 3-year anniversary of the video portion of these commentaries, this week we're just going to be looking back on this memorable last year. So it was 1 year ago this week that the World Health Organization declared the global pandemic. The markets were beginning to shudder, and we sat here on a Friday, much like today, having no real idea of what was lying ahead and just how historic it was going to be. I want to take a look at it a couple ways this week, and again, refresh some memories around what was really going on within the markets, and hopefully some takeaways both from an investment standpoint as well as just a life standpoint moving forward. So if we look at the markets a year ago, as I said, the descent had begun. We're closing in on a 15-20% drop. But in this week that was going to be, the week between the 16th and what would become the market bottom on the 23rd, shelter in place entered into our lexicon. The markets would go on to drop the S&P almost another 20% in just a week, to drop almost 40% from peak to trough in the quickest descent in the market's history. I can remember vividly getting the phone calls. For me personally, it was a traumatic week. My wife went into the hospital. There was a dad at home with his kids, holding a crying 2-year-old, quite literally on the phone with a panicked client on March the 23rd, talking him off the ledge, so to speak, only to get a phone call from my wife that would begin the saga of Ellie and the tough news and times that would lie ahead there. And so I can absolutely relate, and that moment is burned into my memory of just how tough things can feel. A lot of the phone calls we got, people said, I just don't see how it's going to change. I certainly felt that way at that moment, with the world seemingly collapsing around me in so many different ways. And yet right when it was darkest, began, at least in some ways, a way back out, particularly as respects to markets. Markets would regain their former highs within 6 months. That day that, again, the shelter in places were going to be extended, we were told from national figures, the market had dropped almost 10% in a day, marked the bottom. And from then, the S&P is up almost 65% from that point. What did you do in that moment is really what I wanted to go back. Certainly thought about how I was thinking and feeling, but I come back to you. I think you can relate to, again, the feelings, the fear that you had at that point, and yet there was tremendous opportunity for those who, again, stayed the course. For a lot of people who didn't, who looked at that as a chance to run into those more conservative aspects of the market, here they sit flat to down in most of those investments a year later. And so I'm not going to go into it this week, but it was, again, just another great reminder of the difference between risk and volatility. For those people who can live with a little bit more volatility, they've actually here a year later brought far less risk into their lives than those people who tried to shelter in place with respect to their portfolios. As the year went on, of course, all sorts of social unrest, an election season that we don't want to bring up. But here again, more reasons to be fearful, more reasons to take one's eye off the ball. And the market, again, as we headed into the fall, began undulating again and dropping relatively precipitously in the lead up to the election, only to then rally up almost 20% from that time. And again, a lot of those conservative investments that people ran into as they sold off their stocks down over that time frame. So that's the math of it, though. And we talk about all the time here at 10 Capital about the emotion. And when you're looking at that emotion piece, it really, again, comes back to our emphasis on relationship. Understanding who people are, yes, for purposes of building the plan and portfolio, but also just the client experience, whether that's the events, the cooking classes, the nature of how we conduct meetings, so that we really get to know people, they really feel heard, so that when you get into these moments, these cycle between hurt, struggle, growth, and then ultimately giving, you've got a partner who can walk through that with you. Keep you from that mindset that believing any one of those parts of the cycle is a destination, but really something, again, to be worked through, and then inevitably will come back around for better or worse. That's the thing that brings us so much meaning here. It's why we've premised so much of who we are at 10 Capital around that. Because again, as much as we can think back and know those historical maths and resiliency that markets have, and again, because we have them as people, the reality is the key, the glue is that partnership, is that relationship to be able to help walk you through that and help you make those good decisions at those most critical of times. To wrap up, I was watching the new Disney movie Soul the other day, and there was this great scene. If you haven't seen it, this doesn't wreck anything, hopefully too much, at the end of the movie, where the guy's realizing some of his dreams, and it doesn't feel like he thought it would feel. And he looks to the lady next to him and just says that, hey, I thought this would feel different. And she tells him this story about a fish swimming in the ocean who swims up to an older fish and says, hey, I'm looking for the ocean. And the older fish says, you're in it. And he goes, what? This is just water. And that, remember, that journey we're on, that thing that we want to achieve is ever present in our day-to-day lives, as is the task, again, of continuing to build as relates to your plan, your goals, your dreams, and making those happen for the future as well by taking care of the actions you can take care of today. As we look back on this last year, I just again want to personally thank all of you for the support and love you showed me and my family during a particularly trying year, but really the team here, again, the phone calls that would come in, as well as thank you for the opportunity to give us real meaning to walk that journey with you. It's what makes 10 Capital special. We're here in another little corner. The unveil will come in a few weeks. But again, hopefully as we're sun shining today and spring is upon us, we remember the year that's been, but more importantly, look forward to the year that will be. Thanks so much.